So this was the end of my first full week with Marten. And I will tell you that because I'm on a dedicated account and it's all within 200 miles or so from the distribution center, and because of the time that I start, like around 10 p.m., it's a lot of the same over and over again. We know that if it's a Wal-Mart neighborhood market or if it is a Sam's Club, you cannot unload there until 4 a.m. So what they'll do normally is they'll send me someplace that's kind of a drive. They'll send me to one or two places that will usually involve a Walmart Supercenter or something like that. And then if I have a neighborhood market, it's usually after that. So I'll pick up, I'll drop off rather, at one of those places somewhere after. So yeah, it's I don't want to say it's a lot of the same, but many of the same places that I went to this week were the same places I went to last week. Greensboro, is it? I can't remember. South Carolina is a place that I go to, and there's and like every single place is different. Some places you go there and you ring the bell and they just don't answer the gate. You have to go all the way around to the front, force open the doors, which isn't that hard, and then you have to find someone, because what they're doing is when their doors are closed, they're going around and they're staying busy. They're not manning the loading dock area. They're restocking the floors and putting things back out and stuff. So you can't just expect them to sit in the back and just twiddle their thumbs and wait. So they're not always back there, doing anything. But it's one of those things where I'll get there and we'll unload. And sometimes they're on the ball. Sometimes there's a little bit of a lag. They'll have to find someone. They'll have to, he's on break right now. Like different locations, like usually certain locations will have a designated, for the overnight people, the restocking people, they will have a designated hour-long lunch break. If you happen to catch them during that time and you arrive during that hour break, you might be able to convince a manager or somebody to unload you. And there might be one or two people that was finishing up something that might be available, but it might also be that you end up waiting. So there are some of the places that I go that I look at, and I can look at them now when I get my pre-trip assignment in the app. I can look at it and say, I know that location, and if the load is ready at this time, and if I leave at my regular time of 10, then by the time I get there and by the time I get to that location, it's going to put me right in the middle of their lunch break. And if I'm delayed at all from the first places I go, it's going to be more difficult for me because I'm going to be arriving in the middle of their lunch break. And so I'm starting to learn some of them. And what I can do is look at the schedule and say, all right, I need to leave a little bit early. And so I like, for example, I called one day, I said, hey, how early can this be ready? And he says, it'll probably be ready at 8:30. I'm like, can I start at 8:30? And they said, well, let me check. And I was like, my hours of service should be there because I finished at 9 a.m. And he's like, then yeah, you can start this because it should be, I think it was supposed to be loaded and ready by 9:30, but they've been running about an hour early. So he says, that will probably be ready just after 8. So I was standing there waiting in the office. And when as soon as it was ready, they gave me the paperwork and I was out the door at 8:30. So I got there, and by the time I did all the other stops and then got there, it was 1:45. And the guy was the same guy that was there the night before. And the night before when I got there, I got there at 1:52, I think it was. And he walks out, he's staring at me. And so I'm like, okay. So I open up because I was going in this, the OmniTrack system is so slow. It's so irritating. And so you click a button and you sit there and wait. And you go into a coma, and then finally the screen pops up. Or it doesn't. You have to hit it again and then wait a couple of minutes and see if it does. Anyway, I was waiting for the OmniTrack system because the very first thing I do as soon as I arrive at a place is I go into my hours of service and I change it to on duty unloading, which you have to type in. They only have a few different statuses, like forgot to change my status, fueling, and then something else. and I never use any of them except fueling. So I end up typing in unloading whenever I'm unloading. And he's standing there. So I open up the door and he says, "Hey, we got lunch at 2:00. Are you ready to go down?" And I'm like, "Yes, let's go. Let's do it." Cause he says, I jumped up and I greeted him, and that was the first time meeting him. And I was like, "Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I was just trying to do, normally we do our computer stuff." He says, "Yeah, well, we're about to go to lunch." I'm like, "Well, I'll absolutely, if you're willing to work with me, I will absolutely do it right now." So we jumped up and he and I got along great. He was like, I don't mind working a couple minutes into lunch, and he's like, "You're not a jerk." I'm like, I try not to. I forgot, at one point I think it was the second night I saw him. I arrived there and it was about 1:45, and I said, "Hey, we did this in 20 minutes yesterday. You have less today. Let's see if we can get out of here before and not get into your lunch break." He says, "I don't mind mentioning a lunch break for you. You're not a jerk." He said a dick. Anyways, he said, "You're not a dick." And I said, "Well, don't talk to any of my ex-girlfriends." Anyway, that was funny. But anyway, he's a really nice guy. He was really good, and I got out of there a few minutes after 2. And go on to the next locations and stuff like that. Biggest takeaways, I would say, working a dedicated account like this, as opposed to OTR. Over the road, it's all about the miles. You have a certain amount you're driving cross country, you're doing whatever, and you are trying to get someplace as quick as possible. When you are OTR, you're paid by the mile, you're trying to get those miles down as quick as possible so you can get another assignment. On a dedicated account, you are paid a little bit more per mile, but you're not expected to do as many miles in a day. And so when I first got hired, they said we try to schedule 2,000 miles per week, but then your guaranteed pay is for if you do 7 trips a week minimum, or you do 1,350 miles, so 1,350 miles. So if you do, and I did both. I did 7 trips and I did something like 1,800 miles, something like that, which doesn't sound like a lot, especially compared to OTR. But at least that guarantees me my minimum pay, which is good. I still want to get on a 5-2 schedule as opposed to 5-2, 5-3. That way I would be issued a truck that would be mine, and it would carry with it, I don't need to have 3 days off every other week. Just give me 2 days off, that's fine. I mean, same thing as when I was OTR. I was 3 weeks on and 3 or more weeks on, and then I would come back and I would only be home for 2 days and then put me back on schedule. That was great. But I got to talk to some people. I got to see if a schedule becomes available. I would really love to jump on a 5-2. Other interesting things. The heater on the truck, for whatever reason, is only blowing cold, and the temperatures are down to like 50 something. And so the best thing I could do is just, flip it to whatever setting I possibly can. So that way it's not blowing air on me, because the same thing happened on the International LT is if you turn it to just the front windscreen, it will still blow out the front air at you. It doesn't matter what. And you have to if you turn on the blower to the minimum, it will blow cold. If you turn it up to like 2 or 3 stops, it will blow usually the same temperature. But you can sometimes go all the way over to hot, all the way over to cold, all the way over to hot and cold a couple of times. Then it will sometimes, the heater will engage. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you can go all the way forward to your face, then all the way forward back to the front windscreen and go back and forth. And then it will flip something on the inside and it will blow correctly sometimes. Anyway. In my inspections, there is one tire in the rear right-hand corner of the truck that is starting to get down to about 2 millimeters in the middle. It looks like somebody slammed on the brakes at one point and it just ground that thing down to about 2 millimeters in this one little area. Like if the tire is like this, it's like this little area, just like they slammed it on and it scraped down. Everything else on that tire is probably at least 4 millimeters. So I've written it up, but the problem is there is no facility to change the tire there. They will only work on the trailers because you have to go to Tucker for that. You have the fun stuff of I was driving, and the back roads that you end up taking, they're still U.S. or Georgia state highways. So, but they'll still go from like 65 to 45 to 55 to 35 to 55, and police will sit there and wait. They will be sitting there in these little towns. You got the good old boys that will be sitting there watching and waiting. And if they end up getting you and pulling you over, good luck talking yourself out of a speeding ticket there. They want that revenue. And if you're not a local, we'll see you in court. You have no chance of escaping that thing. So one of the things that you guys have heard me say many times is that I will usually drive three over the speed limit. But on a dedicated account like this, I'm not trying to just pound down miles like I am on OTR. You have your assignment every day, and then you will probably you will maybe have a back haul. And if you do, you'll probably usually have extra hours at the end of the day, and they're not going to send you back out for just a little whatever. So you can, in your 14-hour day, you'll work maybe 10 or 11 hours. So I have found that those extra 3 miles an hour have vanished. I will drive the speed limit and only the speed limit, and I will usually put on cruise control, provided it's over 35 mile an hour. Below 30, it doesn't want to go down below 30 on cruise control. I have learned that. But as soon as I see the sign that will say, dropping from 55 down to 45, as soon as I pass it, depending on if I'm going slightly uphill, I will go until I get closer to the sign. If I'm going slightly downhill, I'll go ahead and hit it as I'm approaching the sign that warns of a speed change. Because speed limit sign becomes active as soon as you cross it. So, and I think in the state of Georgia, the law is still in effect, but you have 500 feet to adjust your speed. At least you did as of like 10 years ago. So I will adjust my speed so that way I will be by the time I cross the sign, I will be going the new speed limit. And I pass many police officers, and I sit there and I double check and I glance down and I'm like, yep, I'm going right at the speed limit, and sometimes below. And you know what? I'm not stressing it because I know that I'm supposed to be doing this run and whatever else. Doing a dedicated account like this, where you just have a workload and you do it, and it's not designed to kill you. It's not designed to push you. You don't feel like you have to just pound down the miles every single day in order to get where you're trying to go as quick as possible in order to make money, which is nice. Ended up had a fun encounter with a possum. Possum runs out in front of the truck, way off in the distance, and I see something run out and stop in the middle of the road, and I see its eyes. That's all I see, and it's looking at me, and I take my foot off the gas, but the cruise control's on, so I hit the cancel button and I start coasting down and down and down. Come to find, there is a possum standing there looking back at me. And you don't swerve for an animal. I put on the brakes and I slowed down and slowed down and slowed down, and he was just standing there watching. And being that this is at night, your headlights can only go like 250 feet. And the rule is you never, what they always tell you to do is don't outdrive, don't go faster than your stopping distance in your visibility. So don't outdrive your headlights, I think they say. So like if you see something, the second you see something, you need to be able to put on the brakes quickly enough and be able to stop. So if you can use your brights, cool, you can speed up then. But if you only have like 250 feet or something like that in visibility, then you need to be able to put on your brakes and stop. But with this possum, I was like, well, he's going to move. It's a possum. They usually will move. Well, this one just stood there. And I'm going like 35 miles an hour, and he's just continuing to look. And you look in your rearview mirror afterwards because I went right over him. But I didn't. I was like being aware. Did I feel anything on the wheels? Felt nothing. And I'm not about to stop and get out and look. But because I'm just driving down the road, even though there's nobody out there, I'm like, this isn't like a Cascadia. This isn't like the International LT where there's the skirt that goes like all the way down to the very, very bottom of the ground where it's going to knock anything, No, this is a T680, so there's a little bit of ground clearance. It seems to me like I wouldn't have hit him. I'm hoping. But anyway, I didn't see anything on the, under there. So if I did hit him, it just clopped him down to the ground, and then that was it. Didn't find any gunk or anything like that in the tires. What else? Oh, I was sent on another Niagara run. I finished my regular run. I got back there, and they said, how many hours you have left? I said 6.5. Oh, you have plenty of time. And then they said, would you be okay if we did a layover on you? And I'm like, I would prefer not. And that was my way of saying, let's not do it. And if they tried pushing, I would have said no. Because I'm not set up for it in this truck. It was different when I was OTR, because you could assign me someplace, and when I'm done with my day, I just climb in the back and I'm there. But no, if you send me out and I have an unmade bed, I don't have, you change of clothes, I don't care about, that kind of stuff, or deodorant or whatever. I'll sleep in the same clothes for, multiple days, but I don't have the CPAP. I don't have, any cover, any blankets or whatever else. I don't have it. And I'm not about to sit there, move in and out of the truck every single day. And yeah, I can rough it, I've done that kind of thing before, but why should I have to when I'm a daily driver? I shouldn't have to. They should be able to schedule me and get me home every day. That's the deal. I'm a home daily driver. So I said I'd prefer not to. And so instead they sent me to Niagara. Being that it was a weekend and I had 6.5 hours and I've already been there, I had 6.5 hours the previous time, but it was in rush hour. I said, okay, let's see how it goes. And I wanted to see if I ran into no traffic, which I ended up not having any traffic. I drove straight down there, no traffic, regular, got down and dropped off my full trailer, picked up it empty, got through Atlanta, got down to Niagara, and it still took 3 hours. By the time I picked up the trailer, I went through security, and I left there and got back. It was just after 5 hours. So it's like 5 hours and 15 minutes. So that is the bare minimum, because I was wasting no time. When they told me where to put the truck in there, I'd already slid the tandems. I did that when I left the Wal-Mart with the empty. Went ahead and pulled out, and I pre-tripped the truck and I slid the tandems at the same time, and then I hit the road. I don't like driving with the tandems all the way back. It's way too wide of a turn. It's a different creature altogether. But you guys know that. I mean, it's like you have your trailer here, and as it's pivoting, it's off tracking. It's you're driving it, and if you have the tandems all the way forward, and you make a turn, they're going to pivot a lot quicker, and the tail will swing around. But if your wheels are all the way in the very back and you make a turn, they are going to go in a straight line to the front, and it's going to cut across some ground. So you can cut some of the turns as wide as you possibly can, and you are still going to jump up on the curb. And I would have no problem if the tandems are all the way forward. I mean, there were some turns that I would go all the way up to, and I'd go as slow as possible, and I would creep all the way up to the very, very edge of the curb. And still, I'm looking at the rear of the trailer off tracking and jump at the curb. I'm like, geez, yikes. Don't want to do that. Remember, it's as long as the rear tires stay in your lane, they don't care what happens to the front. You can go into 2 lanes of the oncoming traffic, and they don't care as long as the rear tires don't jump the curb. You're probably going to if you run into a roundabout, though. It's going to jump the curb. Anyway, though, that was the Niagara run. Oh, my last day, my Friday. Why is it my Fridays always end up being botched? It was a torrential downpour. It was 50 degrees. I think it dropped down to 46 over the course of the night. And it was a torrential downpour all night. And based on the workload, I look at it and say, okay, I need to leave by, I think it was like 11. And so I got there, I pre-tripped, I got everything ready, and I went over the scales. And this was the first time they were sending me to Chattanooga and then to Dalton, Georgia on the way back. That takes me over scales. I know this. There are certain areas that I'm familiar with where the scales are in Georgia. I've seen them for years because I live in Georgia, and I also was paying attention to them as I was driving in and out of the state. And I also double checked when I knew I was going to be on the local Atlanta stuff. Because, when you drive on the back roads and stuff like that, and you don't cross the scales, you can be overweight. No one's going to, no one's going to freak out. If you go over the scales, though, when you're overweight, that's when there's an issue. I was going over the scales to go to Tennessee, and if they happened to be open, if the scales were open in the middle of the night, which they probably wouldn't be, but do you want to chance it? Anyway, so I went to slide the tandems forward. I went over the scales that we have at the security gate, and I weighed, what was it? It was 11,920 on the steers. The drives were like 30,000 and change. And the trailer tires were 35,210, I think. So that means I need to slide forward, probably start with 3 and see where you are from there. I pull the handle. The buttons did not pop in. The buttons, to release the slide did not pop in. So, I pulled forward, I pulled backwards a little bit. I kind of tried to see if it would release the pins if I took the pressure off of them. There was no pressure on them because I pulled the handle all the way and then went forward just a little bit, went backward a little bit, forward a little bit. Those pins weren't moving. When I pushed it in and released the handle and then pushed it in, I saw them push back out farther. But as soon as I was looking at it and pulling it, it was not pulling in at all. So just because I'm still a new driver and I did not do in the Schneider account, I did not do a whole lot of sliding tandems. Matter of fact, I don't think I did it at all. I slid them forward at the very beginning because I knew that the pods were light and I'd never end up needing to slide them back. And I just wanted to always have them forward for maximum turning, easiest possible turning, and to be safe in California all the time, not have any issues. And knew I wasn't going to ever run into an issue because pods never got that heavy. And so anyway, there was a lot of OTR guys coming into the gate. And so when I saw a couple of guys coming out of the security gate, I said, hey, would you double check me? I'm still a relatively new driver. Would you double check me on something here? I pulled the handle to try to release to slide the tandems. And could you just double check that I didn't overlook something? And two of the guys kind of looked at each other and they're like, all you have to do is pull the handle and it goes. I'm like, yeah, could you double check me? And they went over there, even though it was a downpour. They still came over there and looked. And when I pulled the handle, one of them got underneath there and pulled the handle. And they're like, oh yeah, this thing's screwed. This trailer isn't going to slide. That you need to take it back inside, and because this trailer's busted. And I'm like, okay. So I called dispatch, and they said, yeah, go inside and see if one of the yard jockeys can help. So I went in and found one, and I said, hey, could you take a look at this to see if there's because it was at this point it was 12:20, and the Marten Wal-Mart trailer techs go home at midnight. So there was nobody there anymore, and they weren't going to be there until morning. So the yard jockey comes over and he tries slamming it with a hammer a little bit. They're not moving. So I call dispatch and say, what are my options? I said, I don't really want to chance it and try to go through the scales and see if I happen to be clear. And they're like, yeah, you're going to have to get transloaded. So I was given a gate. I backed my trailer up in there. They said, grab a seal, and I grabbed the seal and I took it in and handed it to one of the managers inside. And I'm sitting there waiting for 2 hours, waiting for them to transload me. And I go back inside. I'm like, being that other drivers are going to be coming in like 2 hours, would it not be a better use of resources to send me on a different run since I'm ready now? There's probably other jobs ready. And they're like, yeah, if it was feasible, we'd do that, but it's not really feasible. I'm thinking, okay. What do I know? I'm still a new driver, and I'm not very familiar with the Marten system, and not familiar very well with the Wal-Mart system. So I guess there's reasons for it, but so I just sat there. As soon as it was transloaded. And part of the reason that I think it was wrong is normally the reefer is 3 zones. So you have the front, zone 1, middle, zone 2, and then the back is zone 3. And usually the front and the back are the warmer temperatures, and the one in the middle is the colder, to my experience. And in my case, it's usually 40, 30, 40. usually have the produce in the front and the back, and then you have the meat in the middle. And it depends on the load, as a matter of fact, because sometimes it may be that they end up shifting it. And in this case, they put produce in the front and the middle, and then they put meat in the back. So the meat was right over the trailer tires, and that's the heaviest product. So I was wondering if they put the meat in the middle, would it have been better weighted? Again, what do I know? New driver, in this account at least, and still new driver in general. I mean, I've only been doing this for 7 months now, just about. So anyway, I slid the tandems forward. I went and weighed it again, and the scales it was not 35,100 or 210. It was 35,170, I think. I remember thinking, where'd that extra 50 pounds go? But it was probably just because it was a different trailer. Anyway, I slid the tandems forward by, I think, 3 slots, and I was up below 34 on the rear. So I was like, all right, we're good. So I hit the road. Scales were closed anyway. But you know what? If I drove over it earlier, like 2 hours earlier, and my tandems were not slid, I would have been stopped. So, I just covered my bases. I didn't get stopped. And because of our CSA score, Marten drivers are usually stopped and inspected more often than some other carriers. So if you're not familiar with that system, it basically your CSA score, if your CSA score gets too high, then they'll pull you over more often for random checks or for inspections. If it's really high, then they'll pull you over like almost all the time and inspect you. I don't really know exactly everything that goes into a CSA score, but it could be a level of safety drivers not doing inspections properly and stuff like that is part of it. But yeah, you don't want to mess with that, especially since our CSA scores are not great right now. All right, so anyway, went and did that run to Chattanooga and then to Dalton. And then from Dalton, I had an empty reefer. So they sent me across. I'm surprised they didn't send me on the U.S. and back roads, basically, the U.S. and state highways, because it was 102 miles if you did that. But if you went all the way down 75 to 285, then back up 85, it was like 146 miles, I think it was, to where it was to this place that has eggs. And this was actually not my Sunday. This was no, I'm combining my days, because the first time I did that, I just went to Chattanooga and then Dalton. And then I went with the empty trailer to the egg place, and that was the backhaul that was built into it. That was a Sunday when I got there, Sunday morning. And they had nobody at the gate on Sunday. The guy leaves at 9, and I got there at like 9:45. So I'm behind another semi, and you have to roll up your windows and go through this thing that sprays off and decontaminates the truck as you go in. But there's nobody monitoring the gates. You press the 001 and nobody answers. 002, nobody answers. And I called the guy before me, called his broker. I called dispatch, and they messaged the guys. And finally, a guy came out in a pickup truck, and he yells out, "Follow me in." I run back to my truck. And because the truck that was in front of me was on the other side of the sprayer, by the time I crank it up there, and it's like somehow I lost, air pressure. By the time it builds back up and I start going slowly through the sprayer, the door's closing. I'm like, no. So anyway, I quickly pull all the way through. The gate's closing, and so I quickly jump out of the truck and I go running through the, around the gate, because you can walk by it. And I go running all the way down to the building, which I later, when I got behind the wheel again, I tracked as 0.7 of a mile. I ran the road down around the corner. And the guy, by the time I got down there, he's like, "Driver, I didn't think you got through the gate. I was just coming back for you." He's like, "Hop in my truck. I'll take you back up there." I was like, "Thank you. I'm out of breath," because I ran it in a few minutes, high speed, because I didn't want to be stuck out there I'd have been out there for 15, 20 minutes with the other driver, and he'd been there before me. Anyway, is basically drop off that reefer, pick up a reefer with eggs in it, and then it's a solid 34 degrees all the way across everything. So it's sealed. So I just bring it back and drop it off, and they do things. But my Friday was the torrential downpour. Now I'll remember and be accurate on this. I had to go. This time when the trailer was busted. I had to go to Chattanooga and then to Dalton. So because I had to go through Chattanooga, I had to slide the tandems, and because they weren't sliding, I'm underneath the truck, and this is, remember, it's like high 40s, around 50 at the highest, and I'm getting rained on, and it is doing a number on me and my breathing and everything else, because it's just, you're out there, you get completely drenched, and I'm then driving, and I'm irritated because I had to be transloaded, and now it's going to put me in. I got to get over there before rush hour traffic starts, and I get past before traffic starts, and I get up to Chattanooga. I get up to Nashville at 6:30, and unload there. There's only light traffic as I'm leaving Chattanooga, which is very surprising. And I get down to Dalton and unload there. And by the time I get all the way back down towards Atlanta, I have to stop and get fuel. So I fuel up. And by the time I get back, I have like an hour and change left, like an hour and 20 some odd minutes left on my clock. I knew my clock was running out as I'm watching my hours expire, and I'm like, oh, come on. Luckily, there was only 2 stops. No, there was 3, because there was a Chattanooga, Dalton. So anyway, that was fun. That meant that because of all the running around and stuff, since that was my Friday and I went home, I was coughing. I was drinking a lot of hot liquids. I'm still drinking the hot liquids. This here is completely, Disney Cup was given to me because of its size, not because I'm suddenly infatuated with Disney or whatever. But it's a big cup. It was something that we had at the house, and it holds enough hot liquid for me. So, but I tell you, it's irritating. The exemption doesn't work on us. The exemption for short haul, it's only if you're within 150 miles of your place. Anything, you could drive a solid 14 hours. If you have the short haul exemption, but because we do pre-trip and we have to connect up the trailer and we have to post-trip and we have to get out and usually assist with the unloading for an hour, or not an hour, half an hour at a time, something like that. Your hours go down. With the more stops you do, the more they go down. And so it's not uncommon for me to have only drive hours left that I can use for drive and or something else. And it's not uncommon at all. But I tell you, it's irritating when you're like looking at your clock and it's running out because traffic is the most annoying thing to me. That's the reason why I like driving overnight. And that's the reason why I like driving on the weekends. Less traffic. Both of those times. I do not like the bad calls at all when they send me into a traffic area. They sent me on the Niagara run. So I did Niagara earlier in the week. And then they sent me to the egg place. And I got eggs. But the egg place was built into the same trip. So that did not count as a separate trip. You have to do one trip every single day, and then at least 2 days out of the week, you have to do an extra trip in order for you to do your minimum of 7 trips, or you have to exceed 1,350 miles. And since I had an empty reefer, they had me go straight over to the egg place, so it was all part of the same trip. So it didn't even count as a backhaul. My second backhaul for the week ended up being when I had like 4 hours left. And I was really hoping they'd give me a backhaul that would make sense. It was just about 4 hours, a little bit less by the time I got out of there. But luckily it was going to General Mills, which I had never been to before. But luckily it was only like 16 miles, I think. They sent me to the Monroe Wal-Mart to drop off a full trailer and to pick up an empty. That's like 6 miles away. Then from there, my wonderful OmniTrack system tells me to turn the wrong way on 78. Then, and because it tells me to go, which way did it tell me to go on 78? Whichever way, I looked at the map and it told me to go to the right. As soon as I pull out there and the screen freezes and I make the right turn onto 78, it says rerouting. And I'm like, and then my miles jumps up by 8 because apparently that was the wrong way. Which you can click the little eyeball and you can scroll down through and it says, go this way, then go on to, whatever. And it was plain as day. It was telling me to go that way. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go that way. Because you can scroll down through it. And I would see, if it wanted me to go the other way, I would see that it was telling me to go on 78 and then turn on to, 11, 316, whatever. I could see wherever it was telling me to go. And I would know the roads. So, but this one, anyway. Got to General Mills. Their system, I had not been there before. So I had to scan my driver's license, which it did not want to scan. So it said, scan your ID instead. So I scanned my ID. And then I had to go through the whole procedure. And then they have to add your phone. And then they have to send it a verification after a couple of minutes. And then they finally, ask for your information. And then you give them the information regarding the load. And it tells you to go in there and drop your trailer to a certain place and then pick up another trailer. And then you have to go through security, who then asks you a few questions to verify that you're going where you say you're going and that you're the right person. Anyway. I got back and I still had like an hour and change left, but I knew it wasn't going to be that bad because the total mileage was supposed to be like 36 miles because of the detour. And because those are loaded miles, it ended up being closer to like 50 or 60. Still not bad. Not bad at all. Because here's 285. Everywhere inside is Atlanta and busy. Monroe is over here and it was routing me over here. No problem. No problem at all. Little back roads. But yeah, that was pretty much it. That's pretty much. I find myself, normally with Schneider, because I was doing OTR, it was, the first, I knew I had to do a load securement check every 150 miles or every 3 hours, whichever came first. So I would usually hightail it. I'd go like 145, 150 miles. I'd take an exit in the middle of the night, pull off on that exit, and then either, get in the middle of the lane. If it was a stop sign, I'd stop right there. There's not going to be anybody at the middle of the night that pulls off on these little back roads. So I'd go ahead and jump out and do a load securement check and then pull straight back onto the interstate and continue. And then I would, log that as my first check. And then I would do the same thing again. So by the time I'd stopped twice, that's 290 or to 300 miles. And then I would do it one more time usually. And then I would do my 30 minutes of something else when I was doing a long haul. So that was like 400 and some odd miles down at that point. And then from there, I would usually do that at one more time once I got my last 3 hours back. And then the last 100 miles or last 50 miles, whatever it happens to be, to get myself up to 600 to 650 is I would know during my break, during that 30-minute break, where I was going to stop. I would pretty much know at that point. I'd already looked at everything and I said, I'm going to try to make it. If I can make it here, that's best case scenario. If I can't make it there, I'm going to try to make it here. If I can't make it here, I'm going to try to make it here. Can't make it here, I'm going to try to make it here. And I usually have 3 or 4 stops planned ahead as to where I was going to be. And they were usually 30 or so miles apart. So best case scenario, I would stop there. There was only a couple of times that I made it farther than my best case scenario. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. One of those times was when I went through the Rockies in the middle of the night, when I went up from Stanfield, Oregon, and I went up to Spokane, Washington, then went over on I-90 to avoid Winter Storm Finn and all the mess that was going on I-80. I went and through the Rockies, and I had the Rockies to myself. There was nobody out there. It was just nice drive. And I had planned on the drive up there and to get through the Rockies in my day. And then I'd said, once I get to the other side, I'm going to try to get here. If I can't get here, I'll get here. And if I can't get here, I'll get here. And I had planned on that. And it was just smooth sailing. So I continued on. And at that point, it was when I stopped for my 30-minute break that I said, I think I'm going to get to, Three Forks or whatever it was. I drove 500 and some odd miles that day. And it surprised me because the reason why is because Montana does a great job of clearing the interstates, and Idaho already had with the Rockies. So they were already pretty much clear, and it was smooth sailing. And I was not trying to win any land speed records. It was just drive nice and slow through there, but it was smooth and steady. And it was fine. It's the same kind of thing driving at night. When a possum doesn't run out and just stare at you and you're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? But I think the biggest thing about driving at night is when they give you a neighborhood market or they give you a Sam's Club and you suddenly are going to be waiting until 4 a.m. If you call dispatch, they're going to say, well, can you start later? Well, if you start later, then that messes you up because you end up, it pushes you later. There's been a couple of times I've looked at it and said, if I leave now, that's 2 hours away. If I come in at 10, it's 2 hours away, and the first stop is a Sam's Club. I'll be sitting there late. Well, can you start later? I'm like, if I start at 1, that's going to totally mess me up for the next couple of days because I'll be starting 3 hours after I normally start, and that means I'm going to be dealing with more rush hour traffic, and I don't want to deal with that. So I will try. I'll say, is there anything else you can give me? Because that doesn't seem like it's the best use of resources here of my time. Especially if I go to sleep and I wake up at a certain time and then I look at my phone and say, well, this is what I'm assigned. And I'm like, why are they doing this to me? Neighborhood markets and Sam's Clubs, they're not bad. Sam's Club, usually the only difference really is that Sam's Club, as opposed to the neighborhood markets and the Wal-Marts, they want you to lock in. They press the little lock and it brings a hook up and grabs your rear ICC bumper. Then you have to release it before you leave. But not all Sam's Club even require you to do that. You also carry an inventory list because Sam's Clubs, you have to hand in the inventory. In Wal-Marts, they'll look it up and then just print out the inventory themselves. But arriving and waiting at a neighborhood market or a Sam's Club, I'm not a fan of. I'd rather use my time efficiently, and I wish I could just do nothing but Wal-Marts that aren't neighborhood markets and just go from those in the middle of the night, or have it be a long drive. Like, I don't mind driving to Chattanooga because if I leave at 10, if I arrive at 10 and let's say I leave before 11 and I can be in Chattanooga, let's say by 1:30. If I'm just, cruising along, I can stop at the Wal-Mart there, and then I can stop at a Wal-Mart in Dalton, and then I can stop at the neighborhood market in Dalton, and I'll be there after 4 because I'll arrive at the Wal-Mart in Chattanooga at 1:30, and by the time I get back in the truck, it'll be 2. By the time I get to Dalton, it'll be 2:30. By the time I unload there, it'll be 3, and then I drive over to the other Dalton location, and actually, there's a disconnect there. Oh, it was because it was a little bit of traffic. We were driving a little bit slower because of bad weather. There's a lot of rain lately. And because of that, we drive a little bit slower. It ended up being, I arrived at that neighborhood market at like 3:50. So not bad. I'm good at putting in the ETAs. I'm good at the ETAs provided there's no issue. The system will still, if you don't arrive by the time your ETA is put in there, it says, why are you late? What do you mean? Traffic, there's issues. There's things that are going to be in the way that are going to cause you to be late. None of them are something that I'm not, it's not like I'm pulling over to the side of the road and just saying, well, I'm going to stop and eat at Waffle House. It's not like you're just doing this. Maybe some drivers do. Maybe some drivers will stop or whatever, and so it asks why. But once I start, I'm go, go, go. I don't like to stop and, mess around. I just like to go. Get it done. Overall, I do like Marten. I like the fact that I will, instead of being nervous and thinking, this is my first leg, 150 miles, second leg, 150 miles, third leg, up to 150 miles. So I want to try to get a good 400 minimum done before I take my 30-minute break. Instead of me sitting there nerve-wracked, driving down the road and just concentrating on trying to maintain that 65 miles an hour, I find myself driving along with a smile on my face half the time. And when I was driving with Schneider, I was listening to my audiobooks. And I tell you, I had a lot better luck with that. I've listened to some dog audiobooks. I don't know why. The audiobooks I've been listening to have just not been good. Ever since I started with Marten, it's like I'm cursed to have bad audiobooks. There was one about some couple that had been married 30 years, and then all of a sudden the wife realizes that the husband's he wears dresses, and it's set in like the 50s or 60s or something like that. So it's like all taboo, and it's like, how are you going to be married to the guy for 30 years and not know this? And it did not seem interesting at all. Then there was another one about what was it? There's some legal case about this guy who works in a hospital, and this guy ends up dead, and then some woman ends up dead, and then they're not somehow making a connection because these people are dying in very weird ways, and they're saying, oh well, let's rationally think of it as this and this and this, and then somebody starts piecing it together. Must be this like doctor killing everybody. There was like 3 or 4. And I tell you, when you're listening to an audiobook and you can, and when you get back in after you're listening to it for an hour and a half, 2 hours or something like that, and you get back in the truck and you just don't want to hit play before you leave, or you're driving down the road and then you hit pause because, traffic starts to thicken up a little bit ahead. You want to be able to concentrate without any distractions, and you just don't have any desire to listen again. And then when you come to a stop for the end of the day and you're like, I really don't care what happens to these characters. At one point, I remember there was this one thing where they were talking about, it started off and it was like this, there was a killer who killed a couple of random people, and let's start before this happened. And then it starts working up to it, talking about the stuff, and you're learning about the characters. And I tell you, after listening for like 3 or 4 hours, I was so bored. This whole thing, I was just like, I said to myself, I remember saying out loud right before I hit stop on it and just putting it to rest and not listening again. I remember saying, I wish I don't care anything about these characters. It's really bad that I, in my mind, was saying, I wish the killer would show up and kill everybody so the book would be over. I am not a negative person or the kind of person that's just like, yeah, kill everybody. But in this audiobook, I was wanting it over. And I knew it was like a 12-hour audiobook, and I was only like 3 or 4 hours in. I did not want to invest that kind of time, but every single book that I've listened to since I've worked for Marten has been a stinker. There is one, I think it's called Twin Lakes Radio. I think it's 97.7 or 97.1. No, 97.7 or 97.5, I think. It's near Augusta. Twin Lakes, Two Lakes, Dual Lakes, something like that, radio. They play 80s stuff. They play some 90s, and it's good. Anytime I go over there and I happen to remember, I have it saved in the number 1 slot on the radio. So as soon as I'm driving and I go into that area and it occurs to me that I can turn on the radio and probably hear a song that I really like, I do it. Even though the audio system in the truck sounds like complete horse crap, I still do it. And it makes me smile. Just like driving down the road in the middle of the night when there's no traffic. And because here's the thing, you're driving down the road and you know how you go through an intersection and the light will be green. But if somebody else comes up on the other side, it trips the little sensor and the light will turn yellow, red, and then the other side goes and then it releases again. You don't run into a whole lot of that in the middle of the night. As soon as you drive during the day, as soon as it becomes daylight, that's another thing you have to keep in mind, is that there's going to be other traffic out there. So you're just not going to be hitting every single light is green. You're going to be stopping, starting. And if you have a fully loaded trailer, it's a very slow acceleration. I did learn one other thing, and this is something that I cannot speak for all companies, but I can speak for Marten. If you, because I know the Schneider said that that the trucks are covered at 65, but if you're on a team, then you had the ability to use their like increase like 2 or 3 miles an hour every now and then for passing. I never got that to work. Or Sometimes I could get the truck to go faster just in regular cruise control. It would just, if I was going down a hill or up a hill or something like that, sometimes I could engage cruise control. It would maintain it. And sometimes if I was hitting the gas, I was going 65 and then I engaged cruise control right as I was cresting the top of it. And I would back off on the gas and I would feel the gas go in. Sometimes the gas would, the throttle would automatically push it into like 66, sometimes 67 miles an hour. Then would maintain. I'm sitting there smiling, laughing, saying, yeah, keep it going, keep going. But with Marten, there's a trick to it. I don't know if it's the same trick on other trucks or not. But if you want to engage the passing speed, you have your throttle down, and you take your foot off the throttle and you go tap, and then you put it down again. So basically, if you want to engage it, you go tap the gas, and then you go tap, and then you accelerate again, and then the truck will say, you want to go into passing mode, and it will hit the throttle, and once it hits 67 miles an hour, it will stop there. Now, I know this trick, but I'll tell you, I haven't used it. I did it twice just to see if it worked. And because when I heard this, it was in one of the online forums. And I was like, I want to try this. And then I was like, wow, it worked. And so I said, I wonder if that was a fluke. So I tried it again later. And I was like, wow, it jumped me up to 67 again because I was on the interstate and the speed limit was 70. And then I went back down. Cruise control will still be at 65. So as soon as you take your foot off the throttle, it will go back down. But that's a little trick that if you are wondering how that could work, that may be the way to make your governor put you into let you pass it for your passing gear. And the second time I tried it, I was just driving down the interstate. I wasn't trying to pass anybody, but I wondered how long it was going to stay on, like it was going to be on for 30 seconds or a minute. So I tapped it and then accelerated, and it maintained 67 miles an hour for as long as I had the gas, the throttle down, which was, I think after like 3 minutes or something, I took my foot back off. And I was like, well, 3 minutes. I mean, it was something like that. Pretty cool though. But there you go. That's the end of it. Nothing else really to report. It was, for the most part, it's pretty smooth sailing. Don't feel like I'm in a rush until I get to a Wal-Mart and they're dragging their feet and just taking their sweet time. Some of the locations are just like, let's go, let's do this. And they're all happy and on the ball. Some of them are just like, But yeah, that's that. So I guess that's the end of this episode. First full week out at Marten. Thanks for watching.